Welcome to the Pause Assembly Podcast. I'm John, and I'm indestructible. Nothing's gonna stop me now. I'm here with Player 1.
I'm Aaron. This is Smooth Lovemaking.
And Player 2.
I'm Leaky, and he literally just stole my joke. So.
Gotcha.
We're here today to talk about music and games. I wanted to, for this is a broad topic, but I wanted to discuss specifically music music as part of the experience of video gaming. Not necessarily, we could be here all day talking about the games that have one or two tracks that we like, even though I'm going to open up with one exactly as an example. But I wanted to, games that have music that directly affect your experience, things that set the mood, things that, tracks that get your blood going, or tracks that make you feel sad, though this is just a spoiler warning, I'm going to shit all over Final Fantasy VIII later. So, I guess stop listening now if you're going to disagree with that. But as an example, and I'm going to try to edit this in. I don't know how this is going to work with copyright, but I'm going to try to put the specific tracks that we're talking about, underneath what we're talking about it while we're talking about them. No, I cannot do that. It would have been disastrous. Just check the annotations or do a search on YouTube specifically for any of the songs, artists, or soundtracks that we've named. As an example, the SNES Shadowrun. We all played that game in some capacity, I believe, just not deeply. You wake up in that game in the morgue, seemingly dead, but you literally get up and you scare the shit out of the two guys that are working in the morgue. And the track that's playing there, I don't know what the name of that is off the top of my head, but I do know the composer for that game. His name is Marshall Parker. It sort of set the feel of a cyberpunk murder revenge mystery immediately. And I was 12 when I played that game, but I still remember that just sucking me in immediately to the story that was being presented. You get up, you're in a cyberpunk noir thing, and the track that's playing is definitely making you pay attention to the fact that you're waking up in a morgue. And that was not supposed to happen. You don't know who you are, you don't know why you were in a morgue, and then you go outside and talk to a dog. The rest of the tracks sort of fall apart at that point, but things of that nature. I can't really come down for the rest of the music for the game, but something in that vein are the things that I want to talk about today.
I'd like to take this opportunity to mention that nothing has ever ruled or will ever rule more than the Quake 1 soundtrack being made by Nine Inch Nails, and also the install disc for that game also had the tracks on it, so you could just put it in a CD player and play this freaking Nine Inch Nails album with a really bad first song.
I had forgotten about that.
Yeah, a lot of games from that era are like that, actually. One of my favorite video game soundtracks of all time, and I'm going to try to link in the YouTube version of this to various playlists that we talk about. One of my favorite video game soundtracks of all time, the Tigershark soundtrack, did that. You could just literally play that as music. So, also, that was a big deal, wasn't it? Because I remember that being like one of the selling points of Quake, was that Nine Inch Nails at the time was doing the soundtrack.
I don't think it's possible to get any more 90s first-person shooter than that.
Yeah. heavy techno industrial.
Like
that game was a mess of themes, but I guess we'll talk about Quake another time. Did you know what you were doing when you were playing that game really quick? Because I didn't.
I was shooting the bad guys and like headbanging.
I still maintain that the Mortal Kombat soundtrack fits better with Quake 1 than the Quake 1 soundtrack, but as I said, that's a different time. Player 2?
I don't really have anything to add at this point.
Well, for a broader example, I think the one consistent aspect of all of the Sonic games has been their music. Like, that's sort of what the series is. The series is known for a lot of things, but I think the one consistent aspect is that it's of above quality music.
I really like the track where Sonic kisses Tails for the first time. It really moved me.
So Green Hill Zone, then.
That's all I did. Was just crutch in front of Tails. I think that
And
was
yes,
Emerald
to
Hill.
actually answer the question, Sonic whole has decent, well-done music, although normally each game has one or two tracks that stand out. Chemical Plant, I'm looking at you.
Yeah, that's the one that always, like, if I'm just thinking about a Sonic song,
Yep.
that's the one. That's literally the track that just comes into my head. It's way too catchy. Marble Night Zone is the other one, or is that what that one's called? It's Sonic 1.
Yo.
It's like stage 2.
I don't actually remember.
I'm not going to be able to help you here. I didn't play much Sonic.
You didn't.
I didn't have access, or I did not have regular access to a Genesis.
Oh, it's just called Marble Zone.
Yeah, I was going to say Marble Zone.
For some reason, not the beginning part of the Marble Zone's music, but when it starts breaking it down, that really stuck with me about the way the movement that the Blue Hedgehog was making, as well as the sort of methodical pace, the kind of, you're almost exploring, and it really fit as far as 90s platformers and things I hate. While I'm on Sonic, I think my toss-up for best soundtracks in that series are probably Sonic 2, which we already got into Chemical Hill, or the Chemical Night, the Casino Night Zone, and even though I think that was 3. And crap, is it the Ice Hill Zone music that stands out? I believe that's it. And Sonic Adventure 2 Battle, which I actually still have the physical CD soundtrack for. And I might put a picture up of it here. I do believe that's the first time that, for me, Sonic became, like, there was this actual fusion of sight, control, and sound of what was going on. The first game was the first games in the Sonic series were platformers, and I hate platformers. But whatever the hell Sonic Adventure was, I kind of liked that more than anything else. You just have to going through Metal Harbor at top speed. Whatever you could call Sonic Adventure 2, the music fit, the controls fit, what you were seeing fit with everything else. White Jungle is a honorable mention, and whatever that track is when you're escaping through the city is all top-notch stuff. I think that I did not play much of Sonic games after that, though, because they tended to involve werehogs. But just the little bit of what I heard from their soundtracks, we had a copy of whatever that, like, airboard racing game was.
Trickstyle?
My little brother had a copy. For Sonic Rush? That wasn't it. But that music, or that game had just, well, I really liked the music of that to the point where I went to look for the soundtrack for it, and I couldn't actually find it. Well, at the time, it was brand new, and now that I know that, I shall do.
Sonic Riders, I believe.
Sonic Riders, yeah, that's it.
Since I took the trouble to make a deep Trickstyle poll, I would like to point out that if you want to listen to some premium UK garage music, that is the place to look. Continue.
Tell us more.
The game was really bad.
Did the music help or hurt that experience any?
You know, in total, I would say that it actually probably hurt because the game, even when it was running at its best, ran at like 10 frames a second, and the music was actually pretty decent, and sort of imparted a sense of speed. And it just didn't match up. Like the action on the screen could not live up to that sweet grime.
Give us a brief synopsis of the game so that we have a bit of context.
Yeah, it's a game that came out on the Dreamcast, and it was a hoverboard racing game, and also kind of hoverboard tricks game.
Did we play that?
Very briefly. It really, because it exists in the same universe as the SSX games, like there's no reason to ever mention Trickstyle. But
holy crap, I forgot about SSX entirely.
How did you forget about?
Funny story. I will redact names. I bought that game specifically to beat somebody. I accomplished my goal and I traded it in the next week when I realized that I was dumb.
Fair enough. You mentioned having a Sonic soundtrack on CD. Can you remember the last video game soundtrack that you purchased?
It was probably that.
Oh.
Well, I mean, physically, it was that, definitely. That was probably the first one. Digitally, the Convoy soundtrack, I forgot the name. The one where you're playing is definitely not Power Rangers.
Chroma Squad?
Chroma Squad, yes. I was mad that I couldn't get that because I had to buy it. I bought it from not their website, and then I bought it on Steam. But if I would have bought it on Steam first, I would have gotten their soundtrack. So I had to buy the soundtrack separate. And I was mad because I had to spend extra to actually get what I wanted out of that. Great soundtrack in that game, Chroma Squad, by the way.
I think for me, besides the Dark Souls vinyl that I got a few months back, I think it was Silent Hill, honestly.
You have the physical copy?
Yeah, I went out and bought the physical because really I miss Arkham Horror, and nothing says Arkham Horror quite like the Silent Hill 2 soundtrack.
Very, very true. My most recent was also the Dark Souls soundtrack on vinyl.
Yep.
You guys are fantastic. You know that.
And the last soundtrack I bought before that was, in fact, the Snatcher soundtrack on vinyl. And I have to say that the saxophone on the title track is worth the money just by itself.
Snatcher, you know what? I'm not going to go into it.
It's probably for the best.
That's one of those. Snatcher is actually gaining a bit of recognition now for what it is, especially with adventure games getting the recent pop that they did. Maybe we'll talk about it after I've actually cared about it. But it did have great music. I can't really argue with that.
Excuse me, I just saw the Undertale vinyl album on Amazon, and
okay, for clarification, one, I did not actually have Undertale listed as something I wanted to talk about today, but I'm glad you brought it up. Two, yes, these game soundtracks are being released on vinyl. I'm not sure by who, but there is a market for them, and they are selling pretty nicely. I will not be one of those that they sell to, but they don't need my money.
Some people will buy them just to, collect them. Leaky. I actually, I have a turntable and everything, so that's, if I want to listen to music, that's kind of what I do.
No kidding.
But yeah, I've got Undertale, Shovel Knight, all the good stuff.
Shovel Knight's down here somewhere, I think. No, it isn't. We'll get to that really quick. I want to make an effort on naming theirs that we're talking about for the games we're talking about, because I think they go underappreciated. For the Sonic Legacy, We have Jun Sonoe. I'm going to butcher these, so I apologize. Kenichi Tokoi, Fumie Kumatani, Tomoya Otani, that have just apparently just been cranking it out for 30 years. So I mean, great job, guys. You're the only reasons I care what goes on in Sonic anymore. I look forward more to the soundtrack than I do to the game, definitely. For Chroma Squad, we have Raphael Bueller, Washington Rayek, which I'm pretty sure I messed that one up too. Chroma Squad, for a tactical RPG, like that's isometric view on a grid where you're basically selecting fight and basically looking at numbers for most of the game, has like unbelievably emotionally impactful music. Like you're just kind of waiting for like heavy guitars to come in, and they go, no, we don't need to do that. We have better music. So I believe Undertale's music
that's Toby Fox,
was done almost entirely by Toby. So and he doesn't need my praise. He's got it from literally the rest of the internet, but he's going to get it anyway. Yep, Toby Fox. So magnificent job there. There is more than one track in the Undertale soundtrack that I repeatedly just get in my head. Like more than one, like 7 different Undertale songs that just get in my head and stay there. The combat song, which is Enemy Approaching, I believe, that's just the kind of catchy song that you need for a long-form RPG that you're not going to mind listening to for hours and hours on whatever Papyrus's theme is called. I think
that's called Bone Trousel. It's my favorite track in the whole game. Really fantastic. I can just turn that on repeat and just, listen for however long.
I'm not going to cop out and say Megalovania, because we all like Megalovania. But Asgore's theme when you're fighting him, including the beat-up, is something that stays with me for, like, days. That the way that the song progresses, it almost tells the story of the dude in the game by itself. How, like, even at a time, it seems to itself to be a Herc theme before cutting itself off to a more somber. I don't know any musical terms here, so I'm just going to make it up. It just kind of mellows out immediately after that part, and that's just genius. I don't know if that was done on purpose, but man, good job. Or anything. Undine's Undying theme is a personal favorite, and Metal Crusher to round it out. Oh, and I guess I got to give a shout out to Spider Dance because Muffet kicked the shit out of me. But
Spider Dance is probably my favorite.
But yes, any other games. But I just wanted to make an effort to credit the composer, if just so that anyone listening can go and find them themselves. I will have links in the description.
Well, someone's got to talk about Silent Hill 2.
Let's just skip to that. That's perfectly fine. Silent Hill 2 was done by Akira Yamaoka. Somebody's going to yell at me for that one. But this
on the internet?
This is one of the greatest soundtracks, if not arguably the greatest soundtrack in history. So the way that just the song that you're thinking about right now, probably the song I'm playing, but also the one that sets the mood for the entire game. Just you starting out and it just going, I would call it going off with the piano, but it's so reserved for what you're viewing, that what you're playing in, that it only can be described as enhancing the experience. It is the seminal example of what I wanted to talk about today.
Silent Hill 2 turned me onto a genre that some people refer to as doom jazz, which is almost entirely non-existent outside of the Silent Hill 2 soundtrack. It's really kind of interesting.
Mental note, look up doom jazz. By mental, I mean literally writing it down.
I've already done the legwork for this. So if you just want to check out an outfit called Denovali Records, I'll shoot you a link.
Sweet. Shoot away.
Is it too late to change the name of the podcast?
To
Doom Jazz.
Doom Jazz. I'll go back and re-edit the opening to Doom Jazz podcast.
And saved for later.
Yeah, Aaron did just post the link in the chat. I will also post that in the description. There's really not much to say. I am not an audiophile, so people that are have said a lot better about the Silent Hill soundtrack. We're pimping it here. Silent Hill 2 is one of gaming's greatest masterpieces. Go play it if you have not had the chance. Go watch it being played at least to just know why you should be playing it.
And maybe check out the Silent Hill 2 wiki and see what people are saying in the comments section about the symbolism in the game.
Yes, do that. Aaron explained that to us, but that's incredibly off topic. Moving on. My genre of choice is fighting game, and all of my favorite fighting games. This is a weird correlation I found. All of my favorite fighting games have excellent character select music, and I think maybe there's one exception, and that was Blaze Blue. I think the original Blaze Blue's character select music was kind of meh, but like that made up for it with the rest of the soundtrack. So some examples. Street Fighter IV had Indestructible, a very digitized video gamey version of Indestructible, of which I referenced in the intro. And specifically, Capcom Vs SNK and Capcom Vs SNK 2 all had fantastic character select music. Really quick, I don't think, did Daisuke Ishiwatari do Blaze Blue's soundtrack? I don't think he did.
I don't believe he did.
Okay, it was Hideyuki Fukusawa who did the Street Fighter IV soundtrack. And many, many props, if I can just hard segue into Dead or Alive 2 on the PS2 and Dreamcast specifically. There's another version, DOA Ultimate, for the Xbox, the first Xbox, to Makoto Hosoe, who for a while was probably my favorite video game composer. It's odd, but Dead or Alive, I remember Aaron described Dead or Alive to me as a tech demo for what the PlayStation 2 and Dreamcast could actually accomplish. And that's how he got me to play the game, and I loved every second of every bit that was going on. Like, combat was, in a fighting game, is normally the selling point. Combat was iffy in that game, but everything else was good enough to make up for it. So, like, besides having environmental, just a fucking no-no in fighting games. I don't care who you are, what games you like playing. You just don't do that. Besides having environmental hazards, all the models for the characters were huge on the screen. They were emotive without being inhuman. On top of that, the background was dynamic. It was moving. It was almost just on the line of fighting for your attention while you were playing the game, until you were fighting somebody like Aaron, and then you had to pay attention. And then on top of that, you had some excellent tracks reinforcing all of this going on at once. Do I have that soundtrack? I do not. Off the top of my head, the theme for that game, Dead or Alive 2, is Actrasier, which is I do not know the band. If somebody could get on that for me.
Aerosmith.
No, that was DOA 3. And we don't talk about that game. This is a Japanese band. These are Japanese composers, so none of the names need to make sense. Off the top of my head, there was a track called Blazed Up the Mellophone, or something like that. That was probably my favorite track out of that game. I'm a sucker for action violins. And it really helped with the kind of ridiculous nature of backflip kicking your opponent off of a 10-story building into explosive canisters. The track that I was using for various RPG tabletop RPG recap sessions was called Excelsior, as it was mellow but fast-paced. So it didn't interfere with what people were saying, but it was it still kind of still helped, get the blood flow. I think it was the training mode song, if I remember correctly, in that game. Crap. Off the top of my head, the Shooted, Natural High, I think it was, and then Ron something were all stuck out to me, even today, that I can just remember those songs from a game that came out. Christ, wow. Yeah, like 15 years ago. A not that good game. Anyone else?
Not off of Dead or Alive, too.
Cool.
I played that game, I think, once.
Not specifically off of Dead or Alive 2. Anybody have any game soundtracks they want to talk about?
Too many to mention. Like, there's great music in a lot of games.
I'm going to talk about Daisuke Ishiwatari here. Somebody stop me.
I feel
the man
like
himself? What's the...
I feel like there are very few people who are carrying on the tradition of just the rippingest guitars in video game soundtracks.
And Ishiwatari is one of them, if not the only one. Ishiwatari, I don't know the history of the game. I just know that he had a very specific vision for what he wanted for Guilty Gear. Part of that vision was heavy metal, fuck yeah, heavy metal. So not only does Guilty Gear have some of recognizable silhouettes in fighting games, period, he has probably the most immediately recognizable style, would you say? Like, it's indistinguishable from what I would call actual heavy metal. Like, Ishiwatari has such a distinct musical style that he's got his own band. Like, I remember one of the problems of the Guilty Gear X or X2 soundtracks was that they could not find a drummer to keep up with the drum beat of Bloodstained Lineage. That's Testament's theme. And he finally found one and then threw all the money at him, and that's one of my favorite tracks out of that soundtrack. He, I don't know, subcontracted a band to play in New York live for him. He's done live concerts all over Japan. I don't think he's ever been to the States. Somebody correct me for that. I know that he has another band called Lapis Lazuli, who is responsible for some reason, the Korean soundtrack for Guilty Gear and Guilty Gear X couldn't the same. I don't know why. I got nothing on
Every reason I've found on that is that it could be the same. It was just that he had Korean friends that he was trying to get exposure to.
That he was trying to make rich?
Yeah.
Holy crap. He did the soundtrack for Hardcore Uprising. Things just make sense about that game. Hardcore Uprising being a spiritual successor to Contra, because Contra stopped. Looking at you, Konami. Daisuke Ishiwatari also did, he's got 2 voice credits. He does the voice of Soul Bad Guy in Guilty Gear, as well as the voice of Freed Velez in Battle Fantasia. He's the guy that yelled Magnum Jetter and Magnum Jet Landing.
Well.
So yeah. The guy he's responsible for the Blaze Blue soundtrack, but I don't think he did. I think his best work is probably the original Guilty Gear soundtrack. I didn't know game soundtracks could be soundtracks, if that makes any sense. I didn't know they could be individually consumable media until I ran across the Gear, which I was just like, ooh, fighting anime characters, and then I bought it.
All right. I think Guilty Gear works probably as one of the best examples as a standalone, and the fact that I could see someone just listening to to Guilty Gear's music without having ever played the game, having no emotional attachment to anyone's theme, but still enjoying the music.
Yeah, it stands alone, definitely.
Just in general. And I think it's probably one of the best examples. So, like, I'm not a particularly big fighting game fan and never really played Guilty Gear, but that soundtrack is fantastic. Has been part of my music library for quite some time.
I think everybody we know has an MP3 entitled GGX.
Yeah, it's because you gave it to us.
Shh.
But
we'll edit that out in post.
Well, like, even compared to, say, like, the brilliance that is Silent Hill, I don't think that would just be coming into, like, music are just going to sit there and listen to, like, say, Silent Hill's music. But for me, Silent Hill, I guess, kind of needed its game to go along.
Player one.
Yeah, I'll just listen to some Silent Hill.
I didn't say that there weren't people
I'm that guy.
out there.
If I remember correctly, you were using it as atmospheric music for whenever we were playing Arkham.
It is real good for that.
And it worked. I don't disagree.
But certainly, the Guilty Gear X soundtrack is very listenable. That whole soundtrack just slams from beginning to end. Like, it's real good.
Ishiwatari is an actual rock star. I think that sums it up. He's like a video game rock star, but he's a rock star.
Well, if you wielded a giant lighter, wouldn't you be?
Right here, I'm just going to put a giant picture of Soul Bad Guy. Yes, wow. That's his name. All right. I can't talk about... I wanted to use Rockstar as a segue into genre-specific music in games, which I cannot go through a topic like this and not discuss Mad World. And how, like, anybody that knows me knows that I've never been a hip-hop fan. And Mad World soundtrack made me realize what a terrible error that has been. Mad World soundtrack is the reason to own a copy of Mad World. I don't know if they sold it separately. I don't know why they wouldn't have sold it separate.
It's sold separately.
Okay, good. Thank God, because, well, I'm going to get it. Mad World soundtrack, let's see here. Off the top of my head, Survival, Let's Go, Ain't That Funny, the title theme, Mad World. our personal favorite, Crazy. Come with it, get it up. You know what? I think I'm actually just naming all of the songs in Mad World. Ride. What was all of the bosses have a song, but the one that goes so cold, so cold, so cold. Wait, it's just called So Cold.
I think it's called So Cold. Yeah.
So Cold, yeah.
I love that. There's
really not one to not love.
I think there's 4 tracks I didn't name, and they're all super catchy. All of them have the one through line is that they sort of perfectly match the violence, the ridiculous cartoon Frank Miller styled violence that it's going on in Mad World itself. I guess I should give a similar shout out to Max Anarchy Reigns, which is sequel-ish thing to Mad World, kinda. I don't know what you want to call it. It's a separate game, but not. There are tracks there, Laughing at You, My Pride, Soon Enough, which I sometimes find myself just singing. Gotta get the cash. When you're just on your way from my day job takes me from one location to another, and just singing that in between like transits is actually really funny to me. But that's not Mad World, that's Max Anarchy. Where was I? Oh yeah, cartoonish violence. All of those songs seemed hand-picked. I don't know if they were specifically made for do either of you?
I think some of them were, because like there were, I distinctly recall some of the songs referring to like impaling people with street signs and things, and that's not necessarily something that that's not something that comes up a lot outside of the context of that game.
That's survival, is what he's talking about. And yeah, there's specific lines in most of the songs are referencing specific mechanics in the game. The only reason I ask that is because I know the DOAX soundtrack. Okay, quick tangent. I will fight everybody that the DOAX soundtrack is not amazing. No one agrees with me. It's fine. All of those songs.
I never played that game.
I got priors. I can't admit to playing that game.
There we go. All of those songs were hand-picked. None of those were made for the game. They were they just threw money at
Aerosmith.
No, but I know Christina Aguilera has a track on that.
Same
she's the biggest.
I didn't know that.
It's like her, and then you jump to Real Big Fish. So
my only sort of point of reference for DOA soundtracks involving real bands is Aerosmith.
Did Aerosmith work on 4? Because I know there was only DOA 4, that is. I know 4 was, in my opinion, the weakest as far as soundtracks went. I don't have too much experience with 5. I know there was one soundtrack I liked, and that's because song, I should say, yikes, that I liked out of 4, and that was Zany Zapper, and it's because it was just the kind of crazy shit I'd come to expect from video games at the time. Not whatever the step above Garage Band is what I would call the rest of them. I don't know who did that, but I'm still going to look them up.
It was a really strange design choice, I think, to have the music video for Don't Want to Miss a Thing playing in the background of every stage in that game. I mean, I'm not saying it was a bad idea, but I'm just saying that it was, perhaps a little bit unusual.
The Wikipedia page does not immediately poser for Dead or Alive. And that probably has something to do with Tomono Itagaki, but he almost deserves an entire episode by himself.
Yeah, dude's a character.
Daisuke Ishiwatari is who Tomonobu Itagaki has always wanted to be. But that's a whole different... Yeah, it doesn't even list it. I'd have to go digging on that one. Anyway, what were they talking about beforehand? Before I went on a air quotes quick and air quotes.
I believe you were talking about genres of music. Oh, yeah.
Made for specifically the game. Ghost of the Mad World soundtrack. You don't have to play the game. It was released on the Wii only, right? It never got ported. It was completely exclusive, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which just I don't like that. I think that was almost a waste of a game. A waste of...
It had all the motion controls built into its engine, I believe, so it would have required a lot more effort to port it to other systems. Connect and whatever the PS4 had, they could have done it. But
Mad World's composer is listed as Naoto Tanaka, but there are several artists who contributed to the soundtrack and those are the artists that I should have had the foresight to plug.
There's Doja Reyes. Yeah, I was gonna say Doja Reyes is
Sick YG.
Ox.
That's a lot of bull.
I don't have the sound queued up.
Doja Reyes, 6YG, and Brandy Legs on top of Platinum Games in-house composer Naoto Tanaka. Yeah, apparently they Tanaka wanted to, and quote, write in American-style music and tried to avoid a true Japanese style, and they succeeded. Which, I guess, if anybody else has any specific examples of video game genre music, I can go into my next example.
Go ahead.
Ace Combat. For, I believe, its duration, Ace Combat's music has been done by the Warsaw Philharmonic Orchestra. And for a while, that was almost all I would listen to. Just casually. They have the title Philharmonic Orchestra in their name. You kind of know what you're getting. Off the top of my head, the track Bunker Shot for the mission Operation Bunker Shot out of Ace Combat 4 is one of the most atmospheric and cinematic tracks I have ever personally experienced. To the point I would say, stop this, go to the link in the description on the YouTube video and go listen to it in its entirety. Imagine that the mission was specifically crafted to be invocative of D-Day imagery, only they put a heavy storm over it. And it's just basically you flying air support. There are other planes in the area, but they're not doing anything. And your job is to clear the beach for landing. And it's not easy. I've done similar things in many games, but that was one of the only times that I was pulled directly in. There's, to put a fine point on that, there's even radio chatter in that game about, from the, not just status reports, but the troops on the beaches, like, calling out targets and what have you, and the voice actors for that game were, the English voice actors for that game really put the amount of emotion into it to make the situation believable. To give this one parody, almost all through the NES era, if the game was remotely military themed, you were doing some kind of beachland. Ikari Warriors, Iron Tank, Guerrilla War, all of those games you were basically doing the same thing, but they had chiptune CPS1 arcade game feel to it, so you were more like, damn it, I have to put in another quarter, rather than, oh my god, I have to go help that squad land because they're about to get overrun. That's not all. I would say the soundtrack Corona, the song Corona, I don't know why I keep referring to specific songs as soundtrack. Corona is playing while you are dogfighting over a satellite that is about to be sent into space. And there's about 70 fighters in the air, friendly and enemy, all around this thing. And there's nothing... Without prompting, I was reading a completely unrelated book, and they described something as a planet-wide giant air battle, and this song immediately clicked on in my head. So I had come to associate that. I had come to associate that song with massive aerial battles. Those aren't the only tracks by any stretch of the imagination. I would say that Ace Combat 4 is probably the standout in that series. Not that the Warsaw Philharmonic Orchestra had done poor work with 5 and or 6, and now the upcoming 7. But those are the ones that stand out immediately as memorable tracks that enhance my gaming experience. Shoutouts to Stonehead, Rex Tremende. Anyone else? Any games like that for them? Because I'm trying to put off shitting on Final Fantasy VIII as well.
I was about to say, there's plenty of games whose music I liked. Chrono Trigger are the two examples that always come to my mind that I could just basically go through the soundtrack at any point of my day and be fine with. Special shout out to Joe Satriani of the early Dynasty Warriors soundtracks.
I forgot about Satriani.
I've missed Joe Satriani come back into my life, and by that I mean I just need to fucking start listening to your music.
He's the other guy that Aaron was talking about previously.
I guess for all my weebs out there, as far as the original Generation series, its music is fantastic and personal favorites of mine. I've always liked the Touhou music, although that's not really fair because that ranges pretty much from every genre. Even
that's all-encompassing. There is not a single type of genre. You would say that Touhou is basically chiptunes. That's the genre that it comes from.
And even that, there's so many fan-made renditions of all of it. It's not all chiptunes. Those are the ones that jump to my mind immediately. So,
was there a specific or any specific tracks that you would from Chrono Trigger that you would point out? Any specific times that one of the tracks really clicked with you?
Memories of Green, whichever version you want to state. Frog's theme, Magus' theme, those are basically always been my favorites as a whole. And Gato's theme. Gato's theme is that's life. But yeah, Memories of Green and certain characters' theme songs are the ones that always stick out to me probably the most.
When it comes to Chrono Trigger, I do like the theme for Zeal. It's not like a banger or anything, but it's it does a great job of setting up the atmosphere of the place.
Just humming Gato more than anything. This is going to be a hard segue, but I wanted to talk about how dynamic music works a little bit. Because I know there's more than one or two games that use it. Aaron, we were talking off recording, and he said Total Annihilation used dynamic music. Total Annihilation being a late '90s real-time strategy, and I didn't know that. I think the most effective usage of dynamic music was Starcraft II, and I think I mentioned that in a previous recording. I can't remember one, but there needs to be a certain threshold of actions for it to start in that game, or for it to start a specific track in that game. And by the time the action is at a fever pitch, that automatically matches the climax. And I know Blizzard has the freaking money to do that. I know for a fact Blizzard has the money to do that. I just can't prove it other than speculation.
This is going to seem kind of out of left field, but I recommend some of the old Scum Engine adventure games, like the old Monkey Island games.
Those did have good tunes. I enjoyed the Monkey Island soundtrack.
Well, one of the things, they did something really interesting with dynamic music, and it was something that they were talking about. I want to say it was in the documentary for the Broken Age Kickstarter, but they would segue from one song to another when you were walking between screens, but it wasn't just as simple as fading the one song out and then fading the other one in. They programmed the game so that depending on when during the song you transition between screens, they would rewrite part of the MIDI for the song so that it would match up with the song at the beginning of the screen you were going to next. It's really interesting stuff.
Wow.
And if you ever get a chance to catch that documentary, they do a better job of explaining it than I do. It sounded extremely complicated. But
on that note, I just have a note here to mention that a lot of games from yesteryear have gone on to successfully have their soundtracks kickstarted for re-release. I know that some of the Wing Commander soundtracks did that, and the big one I know is Turrican, which we didn't get here originally. We got ports, unless somebody grabbed one of the European microcomputers or Commodore 64. But that guy got paid. Chris, damn, so close without having to look it up. Chris Husselbeck, sure. That guy, he's on record. The Turrican soundtrack is cited as one of the best gaming soundtracks ever, and especially by what Americans would consider international audience. And Chris there, because I'm just going to call him Chris, he's on record as saying that he didn't even, I'm paraphrasing, but he didn't even try. He's just I'm just going to do this, and it's going to be what it is. And it's this amazing it's crazy because the song that always stays in my head is actually the high score. It's probably a better song than any other song in any other game that you can name off the top of your head. I think the Command & Conquer soundtracks got a Kickstarter. I remember seeing talk of that.
A lot of classic game soundtracks also getting the vinyl treatment recently, as we mentioned. I don't know if you saw. I posted a link a week or two ago, but the soundtrack for the Adventures of Bayou Billy is getting released on vinyl, which is just amazing.
Oh yeah, you did send that to everybody.
Yes, that's incredible because that for reference, the Adventures of Bayou Billy is an old NES beat 'em up / driving game / light gun game that virtually nobody played, but it had some real great music.
Bayou Billy here, so don't worry about that part. But yes,
yeah, that's something. That game had some I'm just going to say that game was problematic in a number of ways.
Okay, I found it. It's a Reddit thread in the Command and Conquer subreddit. So no, it was just I don't know who they are, but there seemed to be some interest in it. Command and Conquer is along with Dune /Dune 2 and the original Warcraft. That's Warcraft 1. Orcs and Humans is considered founding the real-time strategy genre in the early to mid 90s. Command and Conquer had, actually between me, Aaron, and Lee, probably name all, but that really stood out then. I don't know why whoever did the original Command and Conquer soundtrack just went off, but they did, and I don't know why.
That was Frank Kopacki, right?
Frank Kopacki, yes. God bless you, sir, and Godspeed in whatever you are doing.
I don't know if you remember this
drum rotation video.
Yeah, there's a video of Frank Kopacki doing a drum solo that you can probably still find on YouTube, and it's pretty special.
Act on Instinct, Mechanical Man, Warfare, Radio, man, the list just went on and on. That entire soundtrack. I hated Tiberian Sun, but
was how much part of the original Command and Conquer? Was that Red Alert?
It was Red Alert.
Red Alert, along with Crush, Bigfoot. Crap, there's always another one that I forget that I just really liked out of that. Was that Shut It, or is that the expansion for Red Alert, where you're fighting giant ants?
No, I think that was the original.
Soviet Union. I'm sorry, I couldn't believe the words that came out of my mouth.
Everything's totally normal about that thing you just said.
Yeah.
Do not have that soundtrack for reference, so I will CNC thing.
Pardon me, CNC Fang. I would like to.
Oh, Fight Win Prevail, which is 6 seconds long. It was longer than most loops that we did, but it was also amazing. Was Just Do It on that soundtrack? Yeah, Just Do It was on that soundtrack. Red Alert, we go to... Was that Grinder? No, that was Red Alert 2 at Grinder. And this is all the same guy. This is the same guy that did all of this. Radio 2, let's see. Industrial made it across multiple games, I think. Yeah, so Command and Conquer's Frank Kopacki, thank you. Just literally thank you. You made sitting and micromanaging individual riflemen running into an obelisk of light bearable. You made Aaron nuking my war factory the first time we played just that much more bearable.
Incidentally, I think Kopacki is still in the business. I want to say that he recently did the music for Grey Goo, which is another real-time strategy game that came out
that does
maybe a year ago.
Because the guys that developed Grey Goo were some of the holdovers from the old Westwood.
That makes sense then.
Yeah, that does not surprise me in the slightest. And he did do Grey Goo for Petroglyph Games. He also did the soundtrack for End of Nations, a game that only I played.
Can confirm. I think I still have your discs, and I didn't play it.
He did the soundtrack for Panzer General Allied Assault. Good lord. We just need a picture of Johnny and him, which is funny because one could be considered a reference point for the other if you look at his any pictures that he has online. a gaming composer's saint, which I guess is the only hard segue I can take to a man that is referred to as the Beethoven of video game music, which is Nobuo Uematsu, who has done more than just the Final Fantasy soundtracks, but he is most known for the Final Fantasy soundtracks, which I don't know here. I don't I can ramp up here because
you want to ease into talking about 8 or
yeah, do we just want to go down the list until I start losing us listeners? Yep, I didn't think so. 1 wasn't good. The soundtrack, Final Fantasy 1 wasn't good, but nobody really cared about that game's soundtrack. You know what I mean? But I will ride, fight, and die over the Final Fantasy IV soundtrack. Specifically, there's a song called Red Wings. You don't realize that it's Cecil Harvey theme song until fighting yourself in Become a Paladin. All of that with the... if I can go on a slight tangent about 4's prologue, that it not only has some of the best characterization for a game made for 10-year-olds in like the first 5 minutes, it also kind of sneaks in a battle tutorial like that, all on top of the aforementioned banger. It specifically establishes Cecil's character almost in media res. He's done wrong already, but you join him as he is emoting on top of this vaguely... I believe that Red Wings is actually a reference to the German Luftwaffe, but I don't think they ever want to admit that, because Luftwaffe is Red Wing in German. Anyway, Final Fantasy VI's soundtrack. I can't really speak to 5 too, as I only had the barest of exposure. I played 5 the most out of the last that I just mentioned, but I didn't particularly enjoy that game. I enjoyed its battle music, but I really couldn't say that the game succeeded in like pulling me into its narrative at all. But by the time I played Final Fantasy V, I was a full-blown adult, so maybe that had something to do with it.
I remember the soundtracks to 6 and 7 pretty well. The rest of them I don't really remember very clearly.
This guy did the soundtrack to 3D World Run.
Oh, I remember that game.
And that had 2 songs in it. But, like, I remember them both very clearly. So, say what you want. Besides 4, for me specifically, the big stop there is either Romancing Saga or Final Fantasy VI. And he even worked with Kenji Ito on on Romancing Saga. But Final Fantasy VI is not... You can't say too much about that game. And part of what made it stand out was its soundtrack. I'm going to go ahead and say a large standout. I would say that video games, especially at that point, where Chrono Trigger was out the next year, and Phantasy Star 4, which I could consider its own... The only thing that was on par at that time was probably, me personally, I could only consider it on, didn't have as good as music as its Super Nintendo rivals. So like when this came out and there was music that wasn't just beeps and boops, like it was the closest thing to like 16-bit orchestral soundtracks that you could probably talk about, though I forgot to bring up Actrasier, which I'll get to after this, I suppose. Final Fantasy VI. That's a soft
It's a
masterpiece.
There's not too much to say. It's a masterpiece.
I am not familiar with any of the specific track names, but that's another one of those games that in the first 5 minutes it helps set the entire movie. If you're familiar, I'm playing the video now, in the YouTube video, but if you remember the sight of Magitech armor walking through a snowy field, you remember the song that was playing during that time. And there aren't many games that set their stories up like that. There aren't many games that have the capability or talent to set this. Did every character have a theme in that game?
I believe so.
Yeah, I think Edgar and Sabin shared one, but no, I think Sabin got his own. So yeah.
Not my area of expertise. This one's to you, gentlemen. Oh, I do have one thing to say, and that is for some reason, we all loved the bit in the Opera House, and
yeah.
I don't know why. I don't know why.
Like I said, there's actually not too much to say. It's brilliant. It's well received. It's fitting from the characters to the situations that are going on. The music just plays wonderfully. I don't, for me to say. It's fantastic.
I really enjoyed 6. It's a game that nowadays I don't have a very clear recollection of last time I played it, or I should say the last time I played through the whole thing, back when I still had an SNES. But they were working at a higher level, a lot of game music back then.
Once again, I don't remember any of the big tracks, but just off the top of my head, randomly the Chocobo theme is the one that always... I remember just kind of running around in circles because I love that song. It's the kind of thing that made you get up and dance. Not me, because I was a nerd and had asthma. Zozo's theme always stuck out. Christ, the Magitech Factories theme. The Velt is one that still just kind of creeps its way into my head every so often. I think the crowning jewel of that entire soundtrack is the app theme song, where, like, combined with the you're on this giant floating island, for people that have not played. You're on this giant floating island, and you're trying to stop basically what amounts to a mad wizard destroying the world. Spoilers. In order to get to that, you have to kill this thing. And by this thing, I mean it's this six-legged bear, Fenrir rear magic wolf thing that, like, shows up in... It's a single, like, all the monsters were single frames of just sprite art, right? But it's this incredibly detailed, huge single frame of sprite art. A song comes on that you have not heard, not a boss theme, not one of the specific enemy characters' themes, not one of any of your characters' themes. It is, I believe, completely unique at that time in the game. And then it probably kills one of your party members, and it just immediately puts you in the frame of mind that, holy crap, this is important. And, well, and then whatever the hell Ultros was doing. He's also responsible for Front Mission, like the first Front Mission, which I didn't know. And then 7. And then 8.
I'm assuming you mean Final Fantasy 7 and not
Final
Front
Fantasy.
Mission 7.
Yeah, yes.
I was going to be really mad if I missed, like, things.
Screw it. Final Fantasy 7's soundtrack, I almost consider... I'm being completely serious here. I'm not trying to make jokes. I think Final Fantasy VII's soundtrack is mediocre outside of 3 songs, maybe, and I'm only saying 3 because I'm trying to give myself room. The Geneva theme song is, well, probably the most iconic song out of the soundtrack, so that's almost a cop-out, but, like, I can't tell you any other tracks that I actually...
I like...
Go ahead.
I like the Golden Saucer.
I'm nodding my head. You can't see it because it's audio.
And I also like Yuffie's theme song. I just didn't like her as a character, so there's a bit of a conflict there. But I liked her theme.
I always... Oh, go
and
ahead.
I still maintain the FF7 battle music is one of my favorites, just in terms of battle themes from Final Fantasy. Outside of a whole, I kind of agree with you. I don't think the music in FF7 is fantastic or anything.
I think it's pretty good. Final Fantasy VII is one of the few Final Fantasy games that I've played all the way. So I've heard all the music. I really like the battle theme, the boss theme. Some of the music that you're hearing a lot through the course of the game is really pretty catchy, which is good. But yeah, not a lot of really memorable tracks. I'm kind of struggling to think of any other specific ones that I particularly enjoy. I can think of... I know the one track that most people are thinking about when they talk about the Final Fantasy VII soundtrack.
True Love Makin' there is referring to the song One Winged Angel, the theme of the principal antagonist Sephiroth in Final Fantasy VII. The vocals are partially in Latin, taken from excerpts from the Carmina Burana, a manuscript of poems and dramatic texts mostly from the 11th and 12th century. Uematsu is quoted in saying that the piece was designed to be a fusion of the musical styles of Russian composer Igor Stravinsky and rock musician Jimi Hendrix. But games aren't art, am I right?
It's alright, but yeah, not an amazing soundtrack, not like hugely memorable. Good, serviceable, but not like super amazing, you know?
Serviceable is, I think, a good word for it, at least in my opinion.
Rewinding a bit, I kind of want to go back to Leaky's comment about the Final Fantasy VII battle music. I actually think that the Final Fantasy VII battle music is one of the reasons I did not enjoy that game as much as I did. I would have, or that anybody else had. I kind of consider, I mean, even Final Fantasy V's battle music was better, in my opinion, than that one, and you've got some of the best battle music in the genre before it. And I was like, why? How could they mess that up? And I can even sort of I can even sort of prove that one because the one in Final Fantasy VIII is worse. Like, it's just kind of boring, for lack of a better term, and they fixed that in 9. Like, it felt to me like there was specific focus put on the quality specifically of the battle music in 9 to address those. I could be wrong, and it's not like Final Fantasy VII does not have a whole shitload of other laurels to rest upon. If you are not familiar, Final Fantasy, I don't know how you're listening to a gaming podcast and not familiar with Final Fantasy.
What do you think about the Final Fantasy VIII soundtrack?
I think it's actually rather well done, and I have nothing bad to say about it.
All right, moving on.
9. We have... Okay, so, quick story. My copy of Final Fantasy IX was stolen from me, along with Lunar Silver Star Story Complete and my copy of Gran Turismo. So, what I'm going to do is talk about The Man with the Machine Gun! Which is the best song out of Final Fantasy VIII, and I'll fight everybody that disagrees with me. 8's soundtrack, there is the big elephant in the living room is the song Eyes on Me. Is that the song? I'm not sure. The vocal one? Okay.
Yeah.
And I was already so thoroughly disgusted. There are videos online right now of people crying to that song. People playing through their Let's Plays and crying to that song. And I didn't know that it had that effect on people. And then I did, and I could not reconcile why. I'm not saying that's not the correct response. I simply didn't get it myself. I was so thoroughly disgusted with the rest of the gameplay mechanics in Final Fantasy VIII by that point in time. I didn't really feel anything. Like, I don't think the writing is bad in that game, to go into it. I don't think any specific part of that game, there we go, is bad enough to call the game bad, but the whole thing sort of is a house of cards. And, like, if you're just not in the mood that day, it's not the game. It's not a good game. If you're not incredibly patient with it, it's not that great of a game. I would actually say that its music is one of the high points of that game. The Man with the Machine Gun, I remember the boss music being a bit catchy. It's been years. It's been probably 10 years since I played Final Fantasy. So forgive me on that.
Man with the Machine Gun and Triple Triad are the only 2 songs that I know or cared about in that game.
I think those are the only 2 songs that had names in that game. I really can't. For a game whose setting I would love to see repeated, sort of a modern techno fantasy. Well, I guess they kind of did do that, didn't they? 10 and on. That's really the only setting you see anymore. Oh well. Who did the... Well, it was not Uematsu who did Tactics. Final Fantasy Tactics. He did Tactics Advance in 2003. Okay, so while I'm talking about Final Fantasy soundtracks, so quick shout out to Final Fantasy Tactics, who had the soundtrack of that game is sort of legendary amongst the circles that I roll in. Ellis, he was on the Chrono Trigger podcast. Him and his brother maintain that they never lost with a specific song when it was playing. They never lost a battle. Personally, there's a track specifically that I just entitled The Song on my playlist, and I'm probably playing it now. That soundtrack is fantastic. I think that's on the list, isn't it? Final Fantasy Tactics for us to talk about?
Yeah, that's one.
Okay,
yeah.
Good. Expect that one. My point here in general is that, and then, like, for the rest of Final Fantasy, for the rest of the Final Fantasy franchise, I really have no experience. I played the hell out of Blitzball. I don't know what the hell the rest of the game in 10 was doing.
I think the music in 10 may actually be its best aspect. Blitzball notwithstanding, it's the greatest game ever put to, in my hands at least. But yeah, I think the music in 10 is actually one of its better points, personally.
This guy did the soundtrack to Brawl, Super Smash Bros. Brawl, Blue Dragon, The Lord of Vermilion, which I didn't particularly like, but I know Lost Odyssey. I mean, I've never played. Lost Odyssey was and he also worked with Kenji Ito on Neptunia Victory in 2012.
The greatest game of all time.
There's a reason why this guy is called the freaking Beethoven of video game music, and it's because he backed it up. Any specific work that he's done, especially in the golden age of console gaming easily stands up to that title. I can tell you that right now. Oh man, he's even worked with the Black Mages, who are a band that just do video game music.
I thought he was part of the Black Mages.
He's listed
as
a contributor. But that's great, and I hope he actually is, if that is the case. I don't think there's any other... There are no other, say, gaming music auteurs that I can think of off the top of my head. I think I went through all of them that I know of. Anybody else?
Yamaoka from Silent Hill is the only one I think that can compete, and I don't think the resume stacks up.
Yoko Kanno did some music for Xenosaga, but she's more known for her... I'm thinking of Yuki Kajura, actually, not Yoko Kanno. Yuki Kajura, known for her anime work, and she's one of my favorite, if not my favorite, Japanese composer. Kanno did some... I know Yoko Kanno did... I want to give a special shout-out to... special mention and shout-out to Yuzo Koshiro, who did music for the original Actraiser, an SNES launch title that was part God game, part action-adventure platformer, not only being one of the blends of genres. I mean, nobody had attempted anything like that game, even at the time of the Super Nintendo's 1990. Not from any sort of, hard, raw display of power, but I'll get into that in a second. So he did not necessarily have anything to work with. And what he got, I will link... And I'm probably playing it already when I started this, but the song's name is Blood Pool. That is 1990. And that song is amazing even today. It's something that I routinely go back for, well, really, whenever I feel like putting the soundtrack of killing demons to whatever the hell I'm doing in life. To put that in context, Actraiser, when that song is playing, you're a god that has come to the surface specifically to slay a greater demon to make the land livable for your subjects who work for you. And that really puts it in context. I'm going to find that article and I'm going to link it because I argued with it initially, and then as I turned the soundtrack on recently and I really mulled points of what that article went through, and it kind of stands up. So I think, unless anybody else has anything to add, I think we just go on to honorable mentions here.
No, honorable mentions is...
Definitely would be remiss not to mention Kentucky Route Zero, which, if you are looking for a game where the soundtrack really sets the mood, you could do a lot worse.
Special shout-outs to, I don't know who did it, but just an old school PC turn-based game called Deadlock has the greatest opening you could ever want.
Brilliant man.
I can't speak to any of the other soundtrack. I don't know if it even has music outside of the opening, but it's by far the best opening that you could ever want. It's called Being a Colonist. Look it up.
It's called Dead Song. It was done by, I believe, either the producer or executive producer of the game, which was produced by Accolade. He just did that in his spare time, and he wrote a song.
I believe is the guy responsible for it.
He just wrote a song about the races in Deadlock, and you have to listen to that. Even out of context, you have to listen to that. Also, that stuff is why Leaky's on the podcast. I forgot all about Dead Song. I should have opened with that. Dog! There is a game that I played on the old Panasonic 3DO. It's called the composer for that game, who I cannot find now for some reason. I thought I had it. I don't now. I'll put an annotation here. But he won awards. This game came out in the 90s, I know. 1994 in North America. And later on that year for the European in DOS. And it came out on the Saturn, which I did not know about. But I know for a fact that the PC soundtrack was MIDI versions of the actual soundtrack, which on the 3DO was CD quality. Also, Tigershark was also, thanks, Aaron. He bought me that game for my birthday. Hey. I know for a fact he won awards. It was not just in, say, PC Gamer at the time. I remember reading that everywhere, that this guy had done such a fantastic job with what was considered... Oh, his name is Burke Treichman, and he won the inaugural award for Best Musical in 1994. And I have not been able to find this soundtrack easily. I found it, but I haven't been able to... Like, I can't find it on YouTube, so I'm going to upload it to the... And I'm going to try to give as many credits as I can. I don't know how that's going to work out for copyright, but if Toys for Bob comes after me, then okay. Toys for Bob, by the way, they're the ones that did... I believe they're the ones that did Star Control 2. And they're the ones that... Because the founder was Richie and Ford, the ones that... They made Star Control 2, but they're also the ones that founded ever doing the Skylanders franchise right now. The Spyro spinoff, not spinoff, whatever. Yes, they are. Toys for Bob was founded by Paul Ritchie III and Fred Ford. Yes, I got it right. They are responsible for Star Control 2, Star Control 3, we won't talk about it. And most notably now, they're responsible for Spyro Skylanders. Where was I? Oh yeah. This music is the kind of... I don't know how to describe it. It's the kind of music that you would expect to be playing a prototypical tower defense game that has... The prototypical tower defense game, which you're trying to also build a town by playing the video game incarnation of literally Kirk Cameron with a great sword. It is a fantastic game. The whole thing is steeped in... It is almost consumed with how ridiculous video game premises are, and it just runs with it. And I don't know why that game didn't get praise than it did. I don't know why it hasn't seen a re-release, but it needs it, and more so for the soundtrack. So I hope you're listening. I hope you'll give that one a shot too. Anyone else?
I think I mentioned everything that I had.
Something Castlevania, but we went over that already in an earlier episode, but just...
Some Castlevania tracks are better than others. Not all Castlevania tracks are created equal. Not all Castlevania game soundtracks are created equal. But to lead back to an earlier point, I would not say that they have the same consistency as the Sonic. But yes, go listen to all the Castlevania. It might be just because Senko no Ron 2 was released on Steam recently, but I remember picking my characters. Senko no Ron is part bullet hell shoot 'em up and part fighting game in equal parts. I remember selecting my characters based on their theme song, like their not the characters themselves, but their character costumes. There's a character called Fabian. His theme is, I guess it's bassy, but it's flamboyant. And there's a costume that really fits that, like a real techno hipster kind of look. My main, who I refer to by her rounder, which is Triad. Rounders are the mecha in the game, your characters. She's a high-ranking officer in a private security corporation. So the costume I chose, which in that game's iteration actually chose style of character we're playing. Like, there were two different variations of the character. I tried to pick the costume that... more went in line with what I think a professional soldier would look like. Just a quick shout out to how things like music can affect your game, your game choices. The stage 1 track for the NES Silver Surfer is a lesson in positive reinforcement for failure. Because the opening 5 seconds is this wild rock anthem. And you got to hear it a lot because that game wanted nothing more than to kill you repeatedly and let you listen to it over and over. This might be a personal favorite, but I think the last thing I really need to pimp... I couldn't fit this in anywhere, but I can't talk about... I have to talk about the Virtual soundtrack in a whole. I can't think of anything more than the story for Virtual On is sketchy at best. It's just completely inconsistent from any of the... I've bought every Virtual On title that has been released here in America, and none of them are consistent from one to the other about what the hell is going on in the games. Virtual On is what I would call a battle arena game where You pilot giant robots. There we go. That's as simple as I can make. And it's never made clear whether you're in some sort of digital landscape or you're in the real, which is especially it causes problems in the last incarnation that came over Mars, because you're really traveling between planets for #reason. That game's soundtrack probably had the most effect on me. The franchise's soundtrack probably had the most effect on me in general. No matter how crazy, the music was always upbeat, but on point at the same time. Even the Angelon's theme, which is a little bit slower, is still conducive with the action-oriented gameplay. And I actually should look up the composer right now, because I did not do that. Many composers, which is weird. No shit, there's another Virtual On coming out. 2018.
Everything old is new again.
Yeah, I can't find anything in particular for any of whoever did the music, so I will put an annotation this out, and then put an annotation. I think that's just about it. Anybody have anything else?
Not me.
None on my end as well.
My closing thought, I wanted to save this one. I mentioned this back in the Symphonies of the Night episode, but the Lab Zero games, I wanted to mention something specific about Skullgirls. Lab Zero Games hired Michiru Yamane, who did the soundtrack for Castlevania Symphonies of the Night, to do the music for Skullgirls. That helped legitimize that game for me. Not only that, but weirdly, I think Skullgirls is accidentally my, I guess, most legitimate claim that games are art. For one character, his name is Big Band. He has a mechanic where, okay, Big Band, the story, Skullgirls is a fighting game, straight up. Big Band specifically is a character that exists in an iron lung, but it's modified to act like a saxophone. So all of his attacks are music themed. They went one step further to allow Big Band to have very specific saxophone mechanic. In 2 instances, his standing medium punch, I believe, actually it puts him into a state. It's a hit, but it puts him into a state where further buttons correspond with specific actions on a saxophone. So you can play the saxophone if you know what those correlations are. The second is during one of his hyper combos, the game stops. Only Big Band can play his trumpet, and your super meter constantly ticks down. So if you can get out a song in the time it takes for your super meter to go, then you get that song off as well as super meter, which is amazing to me, because it means that you had to not only learn the ins and outs fighting game created by someone very familiar with fighting game mechanics. Mike Z is the founder of Lab Zero Games. He wanted to make a deep technical fighter when he set out to, get millions of dollars in loans. So you had to learn how to do that. You almost had to take a crash course in music, specifically the saxophone. And then you had to actually apply both of those concepts to an actual living opponent on top of it. If that doesn't prove that games aren't art, I don't know what is. I don't know what can. There's a clip specifically that was pointed out to me that I'll probably post here too. One where that very thing happens in a tournament, no doubt. A dude gets 2 people. He gets the assist and the active character in a Big Band combo. He confirms into a hyper combo where he does that, and he actually plays Happy Birthday, and then wins the match when the hyper combo finishes. Which is just, now that's true love making. Ha! Full circle. Anyway, that's all I got.
Anything else?
Nope. Leaky?
Nope, nothing else.
Okay. So, Leaky suggested last time that we do just a little bit about whatever the hell we're doing at the end of the episode now. So, I'm going to say, recently I've been trying to figure out some 6, and playing Senko no Ron too. I've got people breathing down my neck about Destiny 2, and I'm probably going to do that. Not 100%. Oh, Marvel vs. Capcom Infinite released yesterday, and yeah, that's probably happening. So, player 1.
I've been playing some Diablo 3, a game which has changed quite a bit since the last time I played it. I don't know if I'm going to stick with it, but it's been enjoyable enough. Also, as always, Dungeon Crawl Stone Soup.
Player 2.
Rediscovering XCOM 2 with the new expansion, War of the Chosen, and Civilization 6.
All right. I believe next time it is XCOM. That sound good?
Devil.
Cool.
XCOM Enemy Unknown specifically. That's the one that was released in recently, 2014. Yeah, episode 6 will be XCOM. So, I'm probably going to discuss the expansion then too. Not the UFO or Terror from the Deep, even though I could talk about Terror from the Deep. So yeah, that's it. And I'll do the outro later. Alright. I just hit my head on the microphone, so yeah. I gotta Alright.